Hello everybody and welcome. I hope you're all safe and well wherever it is you're tuning in from today. On behalf of Intelligent Transport, Siemens Mobility and eos.uptrade, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. As ever, I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm Luke Antonio, the editor of Intelligent Transport. Now, as I'm sure you've all seen, today's webinar is entitled Made to Measure, How Smart Ticketing Solutions and Tailored Travel Suggestions Enhance the Passenger Experience. These are obviously absolutely crucial topics for operators or authorities and cities everywhere. They were before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and if possible, they are even more so now as the public transport sector looks to get back on its feet. So to guide us through today, our speakers will be Steven Ahlig from Siemens Mobility and Mathias Hueske from eos.uptrade. Now, following their presentations, we will move on to a live audience Q&A session where we will pose your questions to today's speakers. Remember, you can submit questions at any point during the webinar using the questions panel situated in the menu on the right hand of your screen. That is everything from me for now, so allow me to pass over to our keynote speakers for a quick introduction. Steven and Mathias, over to you guys.
So thank you, Luke. So let me briefly introduce myself, and I think then I will hand over to Mathias. I'm Steven Ahlig, and I'm heading innovations and business development at Siemens Mobility, and more in particular at that part of Siemens Mobility which is developing digital mobility solutions and everything concerned around intermodal solutions. But that's meant to be a brief introduction, so I hand over to Mathias.
Thank you, Steven. To make it very short as well, I'm Mathias, Managing Director of eos.uptrade, and with my team, I'm working hard every day to make ticketing really easy. Thank you.
Okay, so then let's move on. It should go to the next slide. Yeah, it does. So before we jump into the actual part of the webinar, into the actual presentation, let me at least give a brief overview on the team Mathias and myself are representing here in this webinar. So we are representing Siemens Mobility Intermodal Solutions, and there are various pillars, or let's say major topics and fields. And we are representing here around about 700 people, 700 experts in the field of digital mobility solutions. That is our overarching headline. And there are various major parts in it, and let me just mention a few. So one definitely is routing and passenger information. So routing meaning solutions that give you an answer to the question, how do I best get from A to B? And we are doing that with many operators and have been doing that for decades. And the most visible part actually of that endeavor is often an app. So an app brought live by the operator, but provided and often operated by us. And that is something that Hakon specializes in, Hakon being based in Hanover in Germany. And these apps, which are often the most tangible part of that project, they generate a lot of data. And that is a more recent field of what we do, that we use these data and develop new data-driven services based on it. So there will be much more on these data-driven services later in the presentation, so I think I can be brief here. But when we talk about digital mobility solutions, then definitely ticketing is a major part of it. And we have two groups in our Siemens Mobility family that focus on exactly that, on smart and digital ticketing solutions. One of them being eos.uptrade, based in Hamburg and working with many customers across Europe. And another one, a second one, is Bikemark, being based in New York, more focused on the North American market. So all of that together is the team of Siemens Intermodal Solutions, various groups, but all being 100% part of Siemens Mobility. And we are, of course, also working with other partners and companies, and a strong strategic partner is Padam, a company in France, focused on demand responsive transport. That is an investment of ours. So I think we can be brief here. We will hear much more about analytics, data-driven services, and smart ticketing in the core part of the presentation, but I think it was worthwhile a brief look at the team we are representing here. And with that, I think I can skip to the first part of the presentation, tailored travel suggestions, and the technology behind it, obviously also. So when we look at that, passengers well, each passenger is different in a way. So each passenger has different preferences. They all want to travel, obviously, want to go from A to B, from their home to work, or from work to their aunt or to a friend in the evening, whatever, from A to B, door to door. And what is the best route for a particular passenger is really, it depends on that passenger and on many other aspects. So the best route for passenger 1 is not the best route for passenger B. Many people will be concerned about what is, I hope you can see my mouse pointer here. Many people will be concerned about what is the fastest connection from A to B. And many people will be concerned about the price, the tariffs, the fare. But some people maybe are concerned about changes. Maybe they have difficulties in walking longer times or walking stairs. So there are a lot of people also looking for connections with few changes. And there's even passengers who take a different route and prefer a different route when it's raining as compared to when the sun is shining. And there are many other aspects. And today, increasingly, people also care about the carbon footprint of the connection they are looking at. And all of that basically is provided in literally hundreds of travel apps that the operators are providing. And we have been doing this kind of travel apps. We have been developing and operating these apps for a long time with 100+ operators across the world. So this is something we've been doing, and other companies are doing that as well for a very long time. In a way, that is standard. So, but Corona has changed. Oops, I didn't want to go back. Let me go forward again. Corona has changed that in several ways. So what has been the best route from A to B previously may still be the best route, but people increasingly care, because of Corona, about different aspects. So in addition to, is it fast and how much does it cost and do I have few changes and so on, people are often asking, is it safe? And what is about social distancing rules in public transport? And how could I possibly minimize my own risk and that of passengers around me while using public transport? So these are new questions. So they haven't been asked in this form before Corona, but now we have them. And they are important for many passengers who think about coming back to public transport or using it on a regular basis. So, and let's look a bit deeper here. So this is an example from Berlin, the German capital. They have a strong journey planning app, which is used by many people who live in Berlin, but also by a large number of people who go there regularly. So, and each and everyone who is using that app is maybe looking up a connection for going to a friend in the evening, or going to a meeting next morning, or going to a specific site that's interesting, whatever. So summing up all those people looking up a route results in quite a lot of data in a city like Berlin. So I have the number down there on the slide. You can see it here. It's quite a lot of data each month that is generated by this. And it's good to know that it's anonymous data. So it's not Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so is looking up a route from A to B. It's just someone is looking up a connection for tomorrow at 3 o'clock from A to B. It's just as someone is interested in this connection. It's a lot of data, and we use it in Berlin, using also technology that is also coming from big data analysis and what is under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. Let's not go into that here, but let's look at what comes out of it. What we get from it is predictions on occupation. Now, that is interesting in Corona times, because if you know how occupied a train, a metro, a bus will be in the evening when you are about to go to your friend, then maybe that's relevant for you in Corona times. So let's have a closer look. This is now an example from another German transport operator, RMV. It's a large transport operator. So you can see the figures here, many passengers per year. And what you can see here is just a screenshot from their live app. You can see, I hope it's large enough and that you can read some of it at least. Much of what you see here is standard. It's showing connections. Someone at, I think the screenshot was made close to 2:30, is looking up connections for the evening. He wants to go at a time around 6 p.m. So now the app provides several suggestions, providing information such as travel times, such as price. It provides even information on these 3 green leaves here, if you can still recognize it, on carbon footprint, but there's something new in it. It's small, it will be better, I think, more readable on the next slide. It's information about how occupied the connection will be. And this translates in an estimate on Corona risk. So, and each passenger having that information now in RMV, in this part of Germany, can make up their own mind if they, let's say, want to go with that connection up here, which has 3 red icons here, people depicted by icons, which indicates a connection, a very crowded connection, a very occupied one. Or if they prefer the recommendation of the app, which is marked specifically here, which is in terms of Corona infections and occupations, the recommended one. So, and that is now a choice, and that information wasn't there before. So let's briefly recall how it works. So it's predictions. It's not information about how occupied the connection right now is. It's someone in the afternoon looking up connections for the evening. So it's a prediction, a forecast about how full the connection will be. And it's using what we call half-hour's data. It's the data generated by the app. So if you have a journey planning app, then this journey planning app will generate quite a lot of data, and you can use it to do something like that quite often. So, and this is done here. So we have these 2 examples here, 2 German operators, major German operators, which are live with that kind of solution, which has been made because of Corona. So that is something BDG and RMV have done because of Corona to provide transparency and trust, to show passengers how occupied the connection will be and to provide choice. So each one can decide on their own if it's necessary to take the connection that is already crowded, or if they prefer to go for the next one, which is maybe much less crowded. So here are more screenshots from the same app. And we have seen the left-hand side screenshot, but I would like to direct your attention maybe to the right one, the right-hand side screenshot. So here you can see a connection from A to B, and maybe it's difficult to read, but every line is a specific stop at that connection. So each line would be a specific station along the journey. And the occupancy of the vehicle is predicted as it changes for each stop. So you can see here orange, very crowded. You can see here it will be less crowded. So, and that information is used to calculate which route is presumably, according to the forecasts, the least crowded and, well, in that way, safest when it comes to Corona-driven risks. So I think that's a cool new solution to provide that kind of transparency. I can also relate that operators like BVG and RMV in Germany, they have set for themselves targets, how full they want the metros, buses and trains to be. And it's something, it differs a bit from operator to operator, but usually they aim for, well, they should be around 50% occupied or 40% occupied, but not more. So this is definitely different from what it was before Corona times, but because of Corona, that is a new target. And they are monitoring occupancy levels and providing a lot of information like that to passengers to also provide transparency, which is a basis for trust, and also guide passengers to the less occupied vehicles. So that has been one example, hopefully, how data generated by these very same apps can be used using some kind of also big data technology in the background to generate predictions about occupancy. But that's not the only thing that you can do using these data. Here we have again marked what I've explained already. So here is just, let's say, a selection of other applications that are used by transport operators and that we also do, that all use the same data set, the same anonymous data. A person using the app is looking up a connection from A to B. And many people doing that provides lots of data, and this is the input for what you see here on the slide. I'm not going through each and every item here. Let me just highlight a few. We have talked about the occupancy prediction on the last slide. This is here. Another interesting one, I think, is incident detection. So the same data that we use and process in a different form can be used also to detect automatically incidents in traffic networks. So if someone is not going according to schedule, if people are stuck in a bus or in a metro and are waiting for the bus or the metro to move on, then you can see that in the data generated by your travel planner. And it can be detected automatically if there is an incident. And it's used by traffic operator as a means of monitoring the quality of service and the status of the operations. Or for instance, here, the quality of interconnections, how we call it. So people moving from A to B across a city or across the regions will often have to change, maybe from a bus to a train or vice versa, or various other kinds of changes. So, and usually, if they look up a connection, then the connection assumes certain times that you need in order to change from the bus to the train and provides you a connection that should work. But if there are delays, then maybe that connection will be broken and people have to wait for the next connection. And that's the intent here, monitoring the quality of interconnections. So how often are these connections that should work actually broken in practice? And how many people are affected right now? That's the intent here. Another one, very specific, is rail replacement service. So when, for instance, constructions are going on or are planned in a specific part of a metro, then you have to plan what to do with the passengers during that construction time. And often operators provide bus services that cover the metro segment that is affected by the construction. However, an interesting question is, how many buses do you need in the first week, second week, third week of constructions, and how often? And you can predict that actually using the same data. So I'm not going through each and every one. The message I want to broach here is there is a lot you can do with the data generated as a byproduct by the journey planning apps you maybe already have as operators. There's a lot of value in that, and it should be used, and it is by many operators already. So that has been the first part of my presentation. Let's move on to the second part that focuses on communication with passengers. So, and communication as always is both ways. So it's the operator communicating to the passenger about delays, about new tariffs, about services, whatever. But it's also getting feedback from passengers about various aspects, quality of service, and so on. So, and there's IT and tools to make that work, to make that information flow to the passenger and from the passenger, to make that work, to orchestrate, to monitor, and to optimize it. And we usually drive that under the umbrella name Traveler Relationship Management. So, and that is used obviously also without Corona. It has a lot of value without Corona, but we will come to Corona-specific applications and use cases in a second. But let's briefly look at why it's used without Corona at all. So there are many use cases actually. So when you have a journey planning app, then some screenshots here, then obviously that is a perfect way to communicate with passengers, not just giving routing suggestions, passenger information, or selling tickets. It's also a great way to communicate with passengers instead of banners on walls or screens on walls or whatever, because it's a communication device in the pocket, in the palm of the passenger. And you can do banners in various forms and etc. So for all contents you can come up with. The second important aspect is feedback. So asking questions to passengers and getting feedback on quality of service. That is the typical application when we do not look at Corona. So there are other forms of or other use cases, but let's briefly look at the bottom part of the slide. So communication to passengers is better when it's targeted. So an information about a specific construction going on at a specific station is particularly relevant for someone approaching that station and during the times of the construction. It's maybe not so relevant and maybe even annoying if you send that kind of information to each and every one, especially to the people at home not interested, maybe even people away. And there are lots and lots of ways to tailor your information to campaigns using such tools. So you can limit it to specific times, to specific devices, and most importantly, you can limit it to specific regions. So you could do campaigns that only those passengers are informed about, for instance, in a planned construction, that are approaching a specific station of the transport network and only at specific times. This is just one example. But the message here is that the information is all the better if it's tailored, if it's not just broadcasted to each and every one, if it's provided to the people when it matters. So, but this is, all of that is done and is used already at major operators who use traveler relationship management like this. So what is specific for Corona times? So simple as it is, providing quality information when it matters and to the people who actually should have it is important in Corona times. It's effective. And apps are a good way to do that. So using these means of information at the right time for the people in the affected regions, for instance, on, of course, social distancing rules or masks on platforms in vehicles. Some cities have implemented payment changes in public transport, for instance, that cash payments are no longer possible, at least in some modes, maybe not in others. And people should know about this before getting on board. At least it would improve things. And there are also some cities who have implemented changes in the ticket control process. Also, that would be important to inform about. And it's better if that information is not always broadcasted to each and everyone, but if it's targeted, if it's focused, if it's, for instance, delivered when the passengers are approaching the station instead of being at home and maybe watching TV or whatever. So simple as it is, quality information provided at the right time, and obviously not just once, I guess we need it always a few times. It's an important tool. Equally important is feedback on Corona matters, and that's also used at major operators. So feedback is used in many ways, using journey planning apps, getting feedback from passengers. Typically, it's about quality of service, but this has also been extended, the uses of feedback in Corona times. So something that is done quite often is asking passengers about their perception if people in the vehicles are complying to Corona rules, how they feel about this, if people actually do this and comply to, if they, for instance, are wearing the masks. But also the quality of information. If the quality provided by operators actually is fitting and is of high quality and is really covering the relevant aspects. but also about changes of mobility needs. People formerly were going to the office maybe 5 days a week. I'm not sure if that will apply for each and every one in Corona times or maybe even thereafter. So the changes in mobility needs definitely also interesting for operators, and that's also a good way to ask about it. Okay, so I would like to briefly summarize up the first part of the webinar. So if you are taking away just 2-3 things from this first part, then I would recommend it's this on the slide here. So the journey planning apps, which the operators often already have, they generate a lot of data. And this data is valuable. So we have been focusing on occupancy forecasting as a means to provide more transparency and thus trust for passengers. But there are many other applications, as I indicated, and there are operators live with that, so it works. So it's not theory or something, it works and it's valuable, especially in Corona times. But also quite, let's say, more traditional means to use apps as a means of communication from the operator to the passenger and vice versa. They are even more important in Corona times for good quality and focused information on COVID-19 specifics, but also to collect feedback from passengers. Simple as it is, it really is a means to provide transparency and thus increase trust in Corona times. Okay, so that has been the first part of the webinar. And at this point, I would like to hand over for the second part on smart ticketing to Mathias, please.
Yeah, thank you, Steven. Very, very interesting and very promising, I have to say. Restoring confidence in public transport is so important. Let me now continue with some views on smart ticketing, how it is affected by Corona, and how smart ticketing can help to reinforce public transport in these crazy times. No, it's the right chart. Yeah, let's jump back a few months. All of a sudden, cities were empty. Steven talked a lot about Corona. You probably remember train stations were empty. No one went shopping. Everything was closed. And even highways were empty. Normally simply impossible, at least in Germany. So no wonder public transport nearly collapsed. Subways were empty, trains were empty. And if I remember my first train ride after months, it really felt surreal. I had a whole coach all to myself. And then people started to come back slowly, of course, wearing masks, but a few things were different. For example, buying of tickets at the driver was suspended in order to keep enough distance, but also to avoid exchanging cash. Well, most people didn't like ticket machines even before Corona. They were too complicated to use, different usability in every city. You have to understand the local tariff structures. But now with Corona, people don't want to touch them anymore. People don't want to stand in the queue. And even though Germans typically like to pay with cash, having the right amounts available was always a pain. But now we're seeing a fundamental trend away from cash. People want to get and touch coins and bills. And even my local bakery, which the picture here is from, is now encouraging customers to pay cashless, something what was simply unthinkable in Germany a few months ago for such a small amount. So no wonder that mobile ticketing is booming. It was already a strong trend over the last years, not only since Corona. Of course, smartphones are omnipresent for all ages and types of people equally. In some regions, we saw already 30% of more of all tickets sold mobile. And now we have a Corona boom, a Corona push for mobile ticketing. Buying a ticket mobile is, well, quite easy for the average customer, but if we're honest, it's somehow feels quite similar to, well, using a ticket machine, just on a smartphone, but not really smart. You still have to choose the right tariff, set your route, and also your time. I mean, compared with a phone call where you would have to buy a fixed call duration and so in advance before you start a call. That's why we recommend to go one step beyond and introduce a smartphone-based in-out solution such as our product XiXo. One step beyond, well, is it a small or a big step? If I speak with Neil Armstrong, I would say it's one small step for you, but it's a giant leap for your customer. Let me explain our XiXo. It's fantastically easy for the customer. Just swipe to start your trip and always have the right ticket, nothing to worry about. No tariff knowledge necessary. The system uses GPS, mobile network information, and a lot of the sensors built in all smartphones, combined then with machine learning to identify from all this information motion, the currently used transport mode, changes that you take, and more, resulting, well, in finally the taken journey. Obviously, all the advantages that apply to mobile ticketing are also very valid for XiXo, such as cashless paying, 24-hour availability, and of course, full transparency of journeys and purchases. But introducing XiXo is probably the most attractive upgrade that you can give to your customers. Maximum ease of use. It would definitely help you to win new customers. In my eyes, very important, you as a public transport organizer can integrate it very easily in your existing and typically successful app, empowering your brand. For the customer, it's really helpful to have all information such as routing or maps, services, delays, available at the same place as the ticketing in one app, in your app. So no one really loves downloading anymore another app or creating a new account. You want to have it in one place. Eventually, if you start the project in the early phase, might it be interesting to set up a separate test app or lab app? And of course, this is possible with the system. But in general, we strongly recommend to integrate it in the main app. And XiXo comes with price optimization, best price calculation according to your specification. Just one example, price cap per day or any other time period creates trust and leads to more trips, more customers, and even more sales. And in general, XiXo works with all tariffs, with your existing tariffs, of course, but also brings a chance to test or even directly use new innovative digital tariffs. I will come back to this topic later. I'm really proud to say that overall, XiXo is designed with simplicity in mind, with a goal to make public transport easy. One too much. So in-out systems come in many different flavors, and so does our XiXo, available in 4 levels. Let me explain our XiXo portfolio. And all levels come, of course, with automatic ticket and price calculation, but differ then on how much manual action from the passengers is needed. For an easy start, it's possible to have a solution, which would be here level 2 or level 3, where the customer has to check in and check out by himself, check out after leaving the last means of transport. We will push a notification as a reminder in level 3. No hardware at all is needed here, which makes a rollout very fast and also cheap. But some passengers tend to forget the checkout, and this often leads then to higher clearing efforts with the customer service team. And thus higher running costs. Then we have level 4, check in, be out, where the user still actively has to check in, but that's all then. The system will automatically detect the end of a journey and check him or her out. The manual active check-in helps for passengers' acceptance for such a new system. The fully automatic be out is then very simple and convenient because it's a similar process to a traditional ticketing purchase. You don't have to do, you do have to do something before you enter the train or the bus, but you don't have to do anything when you finish your trip. And in the most advanced solution, this is be in, be out, level 5, everything is automatically, even detecting the start of a trip. Maximum comfort, but a lot of trust is needed from the customer side. So for now, we mostly recommend level 4. The good news, our XiXo portfolio can do all modes. The system is flexible and always upgradable. So it's possible to start small and upgrade later. Your investment is protected. And as I said, price optimization is available for all levels, of course. You decide how to offer your passengers this new dimension of smart mobility, according, of course, to your preferences and your requirements. Waiting for the next slide. Here it is. So we are really convinced that the time is right now for XiXo and in general for in-out solutions. It's by far the most customer-oriented, the most customer-friendly ticketing solution we can think of. The ease of use brings more customers and more trips. With a combination of all available data sources, from timetable and real time to all the sensors I mentioned, and then processed and enriched with artificial intelligence, we see excellent and very reliable detection quality. And especially in more complicated environments, such as underground stations or mixed transport modes on the same route, many changes, it might be helpful to install some Bluetooth beacons additionally. Sometimes it works perfectly without any beacons at all. Sometimes it's helpful to have a few beacons in very critical points, like a hybrid implementation. And we see projects that have a 4-digit number of beacons. Especially for solutions with be out or even be in, we recommend to use at least some beacons since it increases the customer acceptance substantially. The good thing, beacons, I would say formerly known as expensive, are cheap and easy now, both for purchasing and installing them. So technology is mature, passengers are ready. I can only recommend show your innovativeness by introducing next generation ticketing. So let me jump back to Corona and how it affects our business life. Does your new office look similar? On the left, you see, by the way, my current office, at least for most of the times at home. And for most of the time, at least, well, at some days I still drive to office like today. So working from home or anywhere else, but still remote, became almost normal in the last month. This is not a new trend. This trend was not started with Corona, as you can see in the left figure, which was a survey taken from 2018. And the dark bars here show the percentage of companies that is not accepting any kind of remote working. It's decreasing, while the number of companies that is accepting it, or if it's be it fully or partly, is increasing. So this is from 2018, but the latest results shown in the right picture indicate that with Corona, the mindset of the companies has taken a huge step up. The values have almost reversed, and we haven't reached the maximum yet, as the far right bars show. And this will stay. At least many fundamentals of our working life are changing. Even the most skeptical decision makers have seen now how well virtual meetings with Zoom, Teams, Slack now work. Almost everyone has a webcam, and the handling of video calls has finally become easy. Therefore, many companies have decided not to return to the previous working culture after Corona. In fact, we're now talking about a new normal. And this is not only a trend from the high-tech industry, from Silicon Valley, it is affecting many countries and many industries. For example, the large German industrial and technology group Siemens, our mother, has decided to allow several days of remote working per week for its employees. And there are many, many more examples. And proof of the seriousness of this trend is that many companies already started to reduce their expensive office space. When working life changes so fundamentally, the mobility behavior of commuters naturally also changes. As a result, the previously neglected group of occasional commuters is increasingly coming into focus. Occasional commuters are somewhere between, well, sporadic riders and the classical office 5 days a week, 5 days commuting. And while these occasional commuters thus fall into the gap between daily or weekly and then monthly and even season passes. Especially if the number of commuting days varies, a monthly ticket is not reliably utilized, which makes it unattractive, especially in the case of rigid long-term contractual commitments. Day tickets, on the other side, offer the necessary flexibility, but quickly become expensive when more trips are due. In addition, they are quite uncomfortable if they have to be reissued for each trip. So transport companies and associations are thus forced to find flexible new tariff solutions for this changed work and life reality. Account-based best price algorithms are one possible approach. Further options would be discounted multi-trip cards or buying like 10 or 15 day passes at once with a limited validity. Any kind of discounts, always, there are many options where you can give a discount compared to a single booking, or you use a price capping. Digital tariffs in particular offer a wide range of options for tariff innovations that take into account the changed reality and provide convincing offers for user groups of risk at migration without, and that is very important, putting existing revenues at too great a risk. So you don't want to lose all the valuable money from your long-term pass holders. So let me give you some more details about the possibilities of digital tariffs in general. We all know traditional tariffs, typically with zones and rings and comms and whatever. So one basic advantage of digital tariffs is that typically a passenger won't have to deal with this complexity any longer. Forget about tariff zones with distance-based tariffs. It's very easy. It's, well, based on the distance you take, it can be directly linear based or closer to the taken route. Another segment are usage-based tariffs combined with an intelligent rebate logic that provides incentives for customers for additional trips. And of course, price capping, possibly possible per day or week or month or any other time period, giving customers the necessary trust not to overpay. Important, especially with in-out systems, because typically users don't have price information before starting the trip. A fair and customer-oriented clearing policy in case of problems is also helpful to strengthen the trust. And for the price level itself, a transparent extra to the price of a regular pass is normally recommended to avoid price erosion, like something like a flexibility surcharge. So there were just a few examples. Of course, there are many more options. Let's talk. And the rapid acceptance of remote working seems to have even more effects on our lifestyle. There seems already to be a shift away from cities towards suburbs and more rural areas. I personally don't believe yet in such a serious change as the death of the city. But in any case, life outside of cities is also becoming more attractive due to the more relaxed concentration of people, lower population density. If you have a if you're worrying about risking a virus infection. And of course, this has an impact on mobility. And the good news is it can even be of benefit to public transport, as for example, cycling or walking are no longer an option for commuting to work if you move to the suburbs. Perhaps you commute less frequent, but you still commute. And public transport can then take advantage of this if the offers are right. And by that, I don't just mean tariff offers, as discussed earlier, but also options for physical transport. Especially the first and the last mile often poses a challenge for commuters, where public transport means a loss of comfort compared to the car. Additions to the route network through demand-based forms of service, like demand responsive transport, DRT, or new micromobility services, be it scooters, be it bikes, whatever, or even park and ride offers can improve the situation, but should be integrated as seamlessly as possible into public transport usage. This applies to routing, pricing, and ticketing. The passenger wants to get from A to B and has planned a certain budget for this. Which transport modes are used and how the billing between the individual providers runs in the background should be as little on his mind as possible. What is important here is the setup, so that it's not a competition of mobility offers, but a cooperation that strengthens public transport. Planning, booking, payment, and information needs to happen within one app. All stakeholders need to support such a tight integration through the APIs. One convincing example here from the UK, a survey from over 1,000 Arriva Click customers, which is a DRT offer, has found that the service is encouraging more people to use public transport. More than 40% of customers having switched to the service from sole ridership cars and taxis, helping to support the goal of more sustainable travel. And again, I'm waiting for the slide. To emphasize this, here's one more example from our MaaS, our mobility app that we did for Luxembourg, which shows very beautiful the combination of public transport and bicycle in one route information for the customer. Here was in a rental bicycle. Both sides can benefit from the increased attractiveness of the new integrated offer. So it's integration and cooperation instead of competition. And important to understand, intermodal trip planning and information are the foundation of a MaaS platform. A trip not found should not be sold. And again, I'm waiting. Sorry for that. Here it is. So my last slide. Let me briefly summarize my key messages. The how often, the when, the how, and the where to of individual commuting are no longer set in stone, and neither should the ticket and tariff models. Furthermore, it's becoming increasingly important to make the commuting experience seamless, uncomplicated, and even unbureaucratic. The keyword here is integration. Integration of different transport modes, of offers from different providers and transport associations. The challenge for transport companies and public transport authorities is therefore to create the structural and the technical framework for flexible, for a consistent and uncomplicated commuter experience. The use of innovative digital distribution solutions beyond pure ticketing, as well as efficient linking of our players, has a central role in this context. And innovative in-out solutions, such as our XiXo, combined with MaaS and digital tariffs, create a huge variety of opportunities to actively address the current challenges with customer-oriented and forward-looking solutions. So thank you very much for your attention, and it should now go to this very last slide. And with this slide, I hand over to Luke, and of course, Steven and I would be happy to answer questions from your side. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthias, for your presentation, and thanks obviously to you as well, Steven, for your presentation earlier too. There's a lot of incredibly useful information to unpack there for obviously our viewers, but also for me as the editor of Intelligent Transport too. So absolutely fascinating to see some of the ways that operators can combine the use of existing technologies and platforms on their end with these kinds of new solutions from your side in these times to tackle new challenges. And I think most importantly, encourage people back onto public transport services. And Matthias, as you said, I think it's crucial that integration is part of that and that the services become more flexible as time goes on. Obviously, we don't have too long left, so it'd be great to get straight into the Q&A for now. And for our audience members, you can still submit your questions using the question panel on the in the menu on the right-hand side of your screen. But for now, let's take a look at the first question. And Steven, I'm coming to you first. So based on your experiences over the last few months, how have other cities worked to mitigate the risk of crowding on public transport services without having to resort to shutting them down entirely?
I think it's crucial that transport operators show they really care about Corona specifics and that they implement their rules to manage it and enforce it to a certain degree. So if passengers really experience that transport operators try to keep occupancy at decent levels, and that operators really have implemented reasonable and adequate Corona rules and really do something that people really follow it to a relevant degree, at least, then that's helpful. That's a message. And if you, let's say, try the metro, try the bus, and you see that it works, that you can do this without going into absurd Corona infection risks, then that's a message, and that's something that you will tell relatives and friends, and that is something that works. I've seen it here in Berlin, for instance. I've seen it in other cities. So if operators implement Corona rules, care about occupancy, and do something that people also adhere to these rules, that is a strong message. Obviously, it won't be sufficient. So having an infrastructure in the city that takes care of remote working, and that helps at least with remote working, and at least looking at the major events that could really flood public transport networks, it's also a relevant background. But operators can do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen that a lot over the last few months. And like you say, it is important to get that messaging right and sort of reinforce it with your actions. I guess while we're kind of on that topic of bringing people back in to public transport and looking at, the risks of spreading infection, there's a question here for you, Matthias. To what level do you think COVID security and safety measures drive the contactless ticketing and smart application and mass deployment as a whole?
Yeah, well, as I tried to explain, I'm absolutely convinced that on the one hand, there was a trend even before Corona, but Corona gives a boost, Corona gives a push. Contactless is now definitely what everyone wants, and I'm pretty sure it won't go away. People get used to it because it's easy, it's comfortable, so it pushes for long. And also mass, the integration of more mobility providers. I would say at this times you see people with different opinions. Some are a little reluctant to use a crowded subway, so they're happy if they can use maybe a bike or a scooter. But a little later, then they go back to the bus, and that brings up the value of an integrated platform that gives you all the choices without always having to set up new accounts and everything. So I'm really convinced we see a push here that will stay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's been so interesting to observe in the last 6 months or so is how the definition of a word like contactless has completely changed. And I think, Matthias, your presentation touched on it obviously really heavily. Not having to go anywhere near like even a validator with a smart card is going to be something that's really important to people getting on public transport in the future. So having something that recognizes that you come on board, or even just having to check in or check out on your smartphone, it brings a whole new level to what contactless really means in public transport. For what is a completely new normal. I think we've got time for just one more question, and this one is aimed to both of you. So given the solutions that we have discussed in your presentations today, do you think these solutions can be implemented for nationwide or even cross-region travel passengers across regions like the EU, GCC and ASEAN?
Yeah, basically that's more a question towards customers and how customers are structured in regions, nations, or maybe internationals. So typically the technology to do that is ready. So it's not so much a technology question as I see it. It's more a question, is the customer really focused on a region, on a nation, or whatever? So it's not so much a technology question from my perspective. So we do, for instance, nationwide routing or ticketing systems, but typically that's where the focus of individual customers stop. Matthias,
with nationwide, I would very easily, very fast agree. That's already there. And everything beyond national borders is more a problem of willingness of the countries to work together and of the rail systems or public transport authorities. Well, let's say about regulations. Yeah, if you have a solution for these problems, then our technology will definitely follow. So we would be happy to have such a interesting project.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of people would too. Thank you very much indeed, guys. I really wish we had time to take some more questions, but unfortunately that is all we have time for today. With your guys' involvement, hopefully we can do our best to get the remaining questions answered after the webinar. But yeah, thank you very much indeed, Steven and Matthias, for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating so insightful. Really, really appreciate your time. For our audience, as you leave the webinar today, a survey will appear on your screen just asking you to rate today's session. If you could take a moment just to provide your feedback, that would be fantastic. Also, if now isn't a great time for you, then the survey will be sent to you shortly via email too. If you can complete it at your convenience, that would be fantastic. But for now, on behalf of myself, Intelligent Transport, Siemens Mobility, and eos.uptrade, thank you very much. And I hope to see you again on the next one. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.